All right, welcome back, y'all. Thank you for coming back to watch my next video. As I mentioned in the last one, I'm still working on historically accurate undergarments. I was very undecided about which way to go next. The first piece was easy because I needed it for a client for an order that needed to be shipped out. So of course that put some urgency to it. The other pieces, which is about 8 more that I need to make, there's no real deadline except the end of September. So I have quite a bit of time to play with once my school year starts back up, because I'm a teacher and I'm also in grad school. Once that starts back up, I will have more limited time. So I'm trying to make the best of my summertime. But I did a Facebook Live video and some of my viewers hopped on, and the input I got back was to work on the Regency Bodice Petticoat next. So I have decided to work on the Regency set next. That is actually the easiest set. 1, because there's less pieces, and 2, because the only really complicated piece is the corset. There's only 3 pieces needed for undergarments for Regency. If you count drawers, there would be 4. I'm not going to do the drawers because they don't make a difference in the silhouette for photography purposes, which this is why I'm doing all of this, is for photography. So all that to say is I'm going to start with those 3 pieces, and I'm going to start from the inside and work out. So the first layer that would have been put on would have been the chemise. So I am going to start working on that today. And I'm going to show you kind of the research that's gone into it and the supplies that I've gotten to make it before I start cutting out. So when I was first thinking of the chemise, I was thinking of something like this, kind of like an extension of our peasant top, where it just has the elastic running in the neckline, and then you vary the sleeve lengths based on how you want them. And then it's just a straight piece that goes down. I knew chemises were shorter than these dresses. They more fell just below the knee. But I was thinking of something similar to this. So I started doing some research to see what Regency era chemises would have been like. And I came up with something quite different than what I was thinking originally. So here's one of the ones that I pulled up. I don't like wasting paper and ink, so I'm just going to show you on the computer screen. This is on the Museum of Fine Arts Boston site, and it is from about 1821. So it would have been toward the very end of the Regency period. As you can see, the neckline is just straight. It's obviously very wide, so it would have just been pulled in by the corset, and it has straight sleeves coming out. It's trimmed simply. It looks like it has some sort of tuck right here to add some fullness, and a slant A-line to add some fullness as well. This one is from 1790 to 1810 on the Met. This one actually is super similar to what I was just showing you at first glance. However, if you look up close, the way that this part of it is constructed is different than what I was originally thinking. And to show you this right here that I found, which is an absolute treasure trove, the photographs of the actual chemises are not super great. You can see this one is gathered right here on the sleeve, but this is what's super amazing. It actually has a diagram that someone drew out on graph paper that actually gives inches. So you have the body of the chemise. It's actually folded at the shoulder seams so that you don't even have to do a seam there. And then it shows the dimensions for the sleeve and how much to gather it up. And it shows a gusset that goes underneath the sleeve to add fullness. It also does the courtesy of giving us about the woman's height at the bottom, that she was about 5'5", the woman that wore this. Now, I am much taller than 5'5", and I'm concerned about the fit of this on me, so I'm going to have to do some number crunching to make sure that I get the fit right. What I also find interesting is that there was a gore that went in the side. Although it is slightly A-line, it also had a gore in the side. I'm probably not going to do that extra seam. I'm probably actually going to just do an A-line so that I don't have to cut as many pieces. But I'm going to have to do some fancy number figuring to make sure that the chemise would fit me or someone close to my dimensions during the modeling. So that's about the size that I'm going to need. For the fabric, I did a bunch of research on types of fabric. They would have used linen or like a cotton muslin. Their muslin was different than our muslin is now. Their muslin was more of a cotton gauze. But I did go to Joann's yesterday and I found a nice muslin. It's called Premium Muslin, and it actually feels really good and hangs really well. And so I figured it would be a satisfactory fabric for that. It's 100% cotton because it's going to be right up against your body. You want it to breathe. I also pulled out some trims because, as you saw, some of them have lace along the top, and I mean, we've got to make it pretty. So these are all vintage trims that I bought in a lot from a lady a while back. They're all from the 70s, according to her. I'm not good at dating things as far as trims, so I just took her word for it. So I have this one right here. And I also have this one, which I actually really like. And then I have one more, but I don't know if it's too yellow. It's a little bit more yellow than either of these, as you can see when I put it on the fabric. So the biggest determiner in which trim I'm going to end up using is once I get the pattern cut out, I'm going to need it to be able to run along the top edge of the neckline and along the sleeves. So whichever one has enough, because they're all varying lengths, will be the one that I use for the trimming. Alright, so I washed the muslin last night, and I have to say I'm not as happy with it now that I washed it. It is a little heavier than it felt before it was washed. I'm still going to use it for my Regency chemise. However, I ordered some gauze from fabric.com this morning to see if it's more the weight I'm wanting. And if it is, I'll use that one for the Victorian chemise that I'm going to do later in this series. However, this is still a very useful fabric for Victorian petticoats, so I am not regretful that I bought so much of it because it will all be used eventually. I'm just a little disappointed that it's not quite the weight I was looking for in a chemise. As you can see, I pulled it straight out of the dryer. I have not yet folded this big mess, but I will eventually. I wanted to talk about drafting your pattern today. So I went back to the diagram that I showed you online, and I counted the graph paper squares and looked at what they had annotated on the graph paper to kind of get an idea of the proportions of this chemise. I've linked that below for you guys so that you can see it for yourself, and also to give credit, of course. So when I look at it, the top measures about 20 inches wide, which is about right. So if I say shoulder to shoulder, I am about 16 inches wide. I have narrow shoulders. You probably have wider shoulders than me. And you want some extra in here to pull up, because the chemise function kind of like the top half of our bra. So your corset sits more right here, and then you need something on top of that to kind of pull in. And so that's what that's for, is it has a drawstring and it pulls it in right there. So that's the top. The bottom measures 28 inches plus a 4-inch gore on each side. So that would be 36 inches total width at the bottom. It needs to fall just below your knee. So to get that measurement, you just need to measure from your shoulder down to 1 inch or 2 below your knee. Add in your seams. I like to do half-inch seams on these types of things, so add in 1 inch for your seams. When I measured myself, it's 38 inches. So I would cut mine 39 inches long. The neck looked like it was 2 inches deep in the back and 5 inches deep in the front. And the armhole looked like it was about 8 inches deep. It had the top 4 inches of it was the actual sleeve, the bottom 4 inches of it were the gusset. Now, those are the two things I'm concerned about, is the neck and the armhole. So, if I look at the depth of a neck on me, a Regency dress would fall just a little higher than my current dress line, okay? Neckline. So your chemise, you want it to fall below your dress neckline, so it would probably fall more right about where this one's falling. So if I measure from my shoulder to the top of that neckline, it's about 9 inches deep. So I'm going to have to deepen that neckline to be able to make it work on me. And then on the back, I feel like 2 inches is cutting it pretty close. So what I would do is more like 3.5 inches. The neck armhole, I measured around an armhole. I can even measure the one I'm wearing right now. And if I go all the way around, I'm just going to do the front half on this one because that's easiest to do. My armholes range about 20 inches all the way around. And the front half of this one is only 8 inches, so that would be a 16-inch armhole. I'm worried that's not going to be a big enough armhole for me. So I'm going to go up on the armhole size to make it work better. It says that the gussets are just 4-inch squares. That's easy. It says that the sleeve is an 11-inch square, and you gather it up to fit the 8 inches on the top part of that armhole. I'm going to have to change the sleeve for 2 reasons. One, I'm going to make my armhole deeper. 2, I'm not going to gather, because the early Regency styles, a lot of them had a fitted sleeve that was not gathered. And if I have a gathered chemise under that fitted sleeve, that's not going to look right. I want this to be an all-purpose chemise that I can wear with all of my Regency items, all the way from the early 1800s to the 1820s. So I'm going to make a flat sleeve so that it will accommodate all my dress styles. Now, if you know you're only wearing it with a gathered sleeve, make yours gathered. If you know you're only wear it flat, make it flat, or however you want to do it. The other thing I have an issue with is the length of the sleeve. It says 11 inches. Of course, if I do 11 inches, I'm going from the top of my shoulder, and that gives you a visual about where it hit, a little above my elbow. But the ball gowns in the 1810s, late 1810s and 1820s, had the puff sleeves that were here. If I have a chemise that has a sleeve that comes to here, it's going to be sticking out the bottom. So I'm going to do my sleeve length more, so take from the top of my shoulder, more that would accommodate that, which I'm thinking is about 6 inches, plus my seams, 1/2 inch seams, 2 1/2 inch seams would be 7 inches. So let's get to it, and I'll show you how to draw out this pattern. I have a scrap. Let's start with the easy part first. I have a scrap here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw out my sleeve, and I'm going to draw out my gusset. Those are just rectangles and squares. The gusset's the easiest, so I take my Wonder Weights, I line this up along an edge so that I can just literally trace the lines. I'm going to do a 4-inch square, so I'm going to take my pencil, I'm going to trace along this line, and then I'm going to count over 4 squares, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then I'm going to go up again, and I have my 4-inch gusset. I'm going to write gusset, cut 2 on my pattern, and I have the gusset done. Now that I've drawn it, the only thing I'm thinking of is I don't know that that included seam allowances. So I actually think I'm going to draw out, so it's just going to be a messy pattern piece. I'm going to draw out and do 5 by 5 so that I can make sure and include those seam allowances. Plus, as we've already discussed, my armhole needs to be bigger rather than smaller, so it's not going to hurt anything if my gusset is deeper than the original, because we've already established that that's an issue that I have with my sizing. Now that one was 5'5", you have to remember I'm over 5'9", almost 5'10", so it's a little, there's also that sizing. So for my sleeve, I think I'm going to make my armhole 10 inches deep on the front, 10 inches deep on the back. If you take your gusset, the gusset is actually going to be put in as a triangle. So it's going to be across the center of that triangle is how much that gusset's going to add. So it's going to be 5.5 inches it's going to add. If I cut that in half, that's 2.5 plus 1/4, 2 3/4. So then my sleeve is going to have to take up the rest of that 10 inches. So 10 inches minus 2 3/4, I'm going to do minus 3. That would be 7. And then add the extra 1/4, 7 1/4. So I need 7 1/4 on the front, 7 1/4 on the back, 14.5. Plus I need my seams where it attaches to the gusset. I said 14.5 plus my seams is going to be 15.5. So I need my sleeve to be 15.5 across. And then I've already established I'm going to make it 7 inches long, 6 inches plus the seams. Okay? So here we go. So 17.5. And what I'm going to do, well, that's actually not a very straight edge. I just realized that. what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this into half so that I don't have to trace in between two things, so I can still keep up my lazy tracing on the lines. And then I'm going to trace right on my 17 and a half. And I'm going to count down 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And then what I'll do is I will draw all the way across. And then I'm going to draw in my grain line. So I remember that my grain runs that way. I'm going to write sleeve, 1/2 inch seams, and cut 2 on here. I also need to write 1/2 inch seams on my gusset, so remember that. Alright, so that was the easy part. We just drafted our 2 squares. Now we need to draft the body of the chemise. So, roll my tracing paper. I will link this tracing paper below for you guys because this was the cheapest tracing paper that I found when I was looking around on Amazon. I love how it rolls up. I love the fact that it's very high quality. It's better than the tissue paper you get in your patterns, usually in the stores. And I've been very impressed with the quality so far. So I will link it below with the Amazon link if you would like to purchase some for yourself. It is also 24 inches wide, which is super nice because I'm always tracing things that are too wide for my tracing paper and then I'm having to tape, and I don't like doing that. Alright, so I've already established that the top is going to be 20 inches wide. I'm going to cut it on the fold here. The original had the fold cut on the shoulder seams. I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to put a seam here. I feel like that's easier to do. And then, so if I divide that in half, 20 inches divided in half, I'm going to come out 10 inches, I'm going to come out 10 inches for the edge. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I'm going to trace down here. I also want to trace down 10 inches for my armhole depth. So let me count, make sure that's 10. Oh, I didn't line this up at the top. There we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. All right, 10 is right here. So that's where my armhole is going to stop. And then what I know is that from there, I'm going to slant to the width that I want. So we said it was 36 inches finished. I'm going to need to add for my seams. So that's add an inch for my seams. So, well, I'm going to divide the 36 in half, which would be 18. And then I'm going to add an inch for my seams, which would be 19. So I'm going to be lazy and just measure instead of count. That brings me out to this square right here. But I also need to check the length. I measured from my shoulder down. I'm looking at 38 inches plus my seams, so I'm looking at 39 inches. Let's untwist this. So I actually over estimated on the length. 39 is here. So I need to bring this up. So right here at this corner is where I want to slant out to. And that's where I use my yardstick. So I bring my yardstick, take from the bottom of that armhole, I slant out to my little cross that I just made. And then I draw a straight across for my hem. Now obviously if you want a deeper hem, I actually haven't researched hems on chemises. A lot of times the reason for a deeper hem is to make something hang heavier or stand out. I don't think you would really need that, either one of those things on a chemise. But if that's what you're wanting for your chemise, then you would do more than 1/2 inch hem. I'm just allocating a 1/2 inch hem. You're gonna write fold right here, and then I'm gonna actually make this one the front. The back would be identical up to this point until we get to the neckline. Front, cut one on fold, 1/2 inch seams. Now, the neckline. As I said, you're looking at a 9-inch deep neckline. Now, you also have to remember your seams. So if I want my neckline to be 9 inches deep, I actually need to make it 8.5 because it's going to take in a 1/2 inch and make it deeper, right? But I also have to add a 1/2 inch up here for the shoulder seam, so I'm even, right? So I can literally just draw 9 inches down, and then when I looked at the diagram, the shoulder seams look to be about 3 inches wide, which would be about right. From sewing Regency dresses, I know that those shoulders are super narrow, especially on the ball gowns. So about 3 inches seems just about perfect, because then by the time you do seams, you're looking at a 2-inch wide shoulder, which would fit very nicely under ball gown. So I'm going to draw down 9 inches. I'm just going to do a square neckline to start with, and then I'll go back and add the curve. So here's my 9 inches down. And then I am going to, so if I have 10 inches across, and 3 of that is my shoulder, that leaves 7 inches this way. So I'm going to go 7 inches. So there's my neckline. The only thing I have left is to add a curve. You can get a bowl if you want a perfect curve. Get a bowl and trace it. I don't want a perfect curve because I want it to move more gradually coming out here and then more drastically curve here. So I'm going to just kind of sketch it. When I go to cut it, I will probably mess with it even further, but this is my preliminary attempt at a curve. Okay? So the process would be identical for the back now. Okay? You could actually use this same piece for the back and just draw a higher neckline here, which is what I might actually do to save on my tissue paper. And then my mother does not approve, but what I do is I just kind of lift it and cut right underneath it. If you're a beginner, I don't recommend that method, but that's what I do a lot of times to save on tissue paper and save patterns and things. So you're going to do the exact same thing. You're just going to draw on your neckline lower, not lower, higher. You're going to draw on your neckline higher for the back. So you're going to come down, I'm thinking 3.5 to be on the safe side, because I don't want my chemise showing out the back. So I'm going to come down 3.5 and do the same thing, square, and then draw on a curve. And because the neckline is that big, you can just pull it over your head. There's no need for buttons or anything at the back. You can just do that. So that is how you will draft your pattern, and then you can fold your fabric. Hopefully yours is folded much nicer than mine currently is, and lay it out, cut it out. So those are your next steps. Okay, I have semi-pressed the fabric. The wrinkles are not coming out very nicely, but if I steam it, it will be fine. I just haven't given that much effort to it yet. I have sewn these shoulder seams, as you can see. Well, I cut everything out, and I pressed it and sewn the shoulder seams. As you can see, I may have gone a little too deep with my neckline. However, 2 things. 1, when I take the seam and add the lace will bring it back up again. 2, because the casing runs all the way around, I can also pull it up this way if I need to pull it higher and move the gathers here rather than all right here. So I am not concerned about that right now. I have chosen the lace, although it's polyester lace, probably from the 1970s, and not completely authentic. I think it will look darling and is just the right amount. I have decided to forego the lace in the sleeves because, as I mentioned earlier with the ball gown sleeves, I don't want them too long and sticking out. And then I cut some bias tape and I folded under 1 inch edge, 1/4 inch. My neckline seam is going to end up being only a 1/4 inch because by the time I put on the lace and the 1/4 inch of the bias tape, my bias tape, I forgot to mention, I cut it 1 inch wide. Then I fold it under a 1/4 inch, and then I will take a 1/4 inch seam on the other side, the still raw edge. That will leave about a 1/2 inch to run 1/4 inch cotton twill tape through to gather the neckline. If you do want to take a true 1/2 inch seam around here, then you can just make your bias tape wider, make it a 1/4 inch wider, make it a 1 1/4 inch, and that would work fine, and you could take your 1/2 inch. The problem with the lace is I have to sew it right on the edge. Actually, so I'm playing around with 2 different ways of sewing the lace. Usually, I would just put it in right now and then put the bias tape on top of it, and then when it folds it down, it would flip out like this, right? But I've also done it where I top stitch it in after I've done the bias tape, and I'm playing around with doing it that way this time, for multiple reasons. It's trickier to get it even, especially when it's a narrower lace, when you're putting it inside a seam as opposed to top stitching it on later. So I think I'm going to top stitch it on later. I'm pinning on the bias tape right now. I actually made the decision to pin it from the inside out. So I'm pinning the right side of the bias tape to the wrong side of, as you can see by the seam, the shoulder seam, and then it's going to flip. And the reason for this is there's an opening for the cording in the front middle. And if you're trying to tighten something, you don't have to tie it on the inside. You want to be able to tie it on the outside. So that way, when it flips to the outside, this opening will be on the outside of the chemise so that it will be easy to pull and tighten. I'm also going to go with what I mentioned. I'm going to top stitch the lace on after I get this bias casing on. I'm stitching on my lace. So I stitched on my bias tape and then just flipped it up. I flipped the seam down toward the actual chemise. And then what I did was on the inside of the chemise, I laid the lace, and then I'm stitching right in the middle of it, if you can see. And I started and stopped it at the shoulder seam. Since this is a polyester, it's not prone to fraying or anything. I just overlapped it. I didn't even seam it together, and just overlapped it. And then once I'm done stitching this on, I will take that bias tape and flip it to the outside and top stitch it on the outside, and then I can run my twill tape through that to gather my neckline. Alright, so my neckline is finished. As you can see, this is the front middle, and you can see where the casing has an opening. All I did was when I ran the bias tape, I just folded it back right there, and I left that open so that I can run my ribbon in there and out through there, and then pull it up to fit. As I showed you, I top stitched the lace on the back before I flipped this over and top stitched it. So now I'm going to run my ribbon. For historical accuracy, from what I understand so far, you should use something like a cotton twill tape, like a 1/4 inch wide cotton twill tape. I don't have any. I tried to find some at Joann's the other day. I have found an online source, but I haven't put in my order yet, and we know that even if I did put in my order, it would be a little while till I received it. So I want to get this done for now. One of the nice things about running things in casings is it's easy to take them out and replace them later. So I am going to put in a ribbon that makes me happy. I bought this lavender polka dot ribbon in a collection from Michael's a while ago. Super cheap with a bunch of different variety. I'm sure it's polyester. I didn't even bother to look. It is 1/4 inch wide. What I'm going to do is run it in there for now. And then when I need to wear this chemise under a sheer white dress and the purple is a problem, I'll pull it out and replace it with the cotton twill tape, which I am sure I will have by then because I don't even own a Regency sheer white dress at this point. So that is sometime in the future. So what I've done is, let me show you the process. I just put the safety pin on the end because it's a 1/4 inch wide casing. It's wide enough for this safety pin, a standard size safety pin. I just put it right there, and then I'm just going to start in the middle right here, insert in my casing, and then just gather and pull all the way, and repeat that all the way around. And then I will have that in the front to pull and fit to my neckline. Alright, neckline is finished. I just actually tried on my Regency ball gown on top of it, and you just kind of have to mess around with the gathers to get it to be the right height so that it doesn't show in the neckline of the ball gown, which is one of the lower gowns, of course, lower neck gowns that I'll wear it with. So I'm actually glad that I cut the neck as deep as I did. So I would say still go with that measuring system that I used for that to get it right. Because you can always pull it up here, you can, move the gathers down out of that part so that they're just in the front. You can do all kinds of things with it to make it fit with the dress that you're wearing, which is the beauty of having a casing around the neck. So I'm super excited. I love the purple. It has just a little bit of color here. So yeah, let me zoom in or come closer so you guys can see the lace and the detail. Okay, so I did my YouTube research and looked at gussets because, as I mentioned before, I've never put in a gusset. Almost 30 years of sewing, and I've never had to do one of those before. So I did a test run on the first sleeve so that I could tell you guys the most efficient, painless way to do it on the second sleeve. So let me show you first what the gusset looks like, okay? So here is, we're looking at my left sleeve, and you see how the gusset is this triangle down here, okay? So then I will flip it. So if you look at it this way, you can see how it has the diamond shape, or if you cut in half, it's a Y seam that way and a Y seam up this way to the edge of the sleeve, okay? I don't know if you can tell, but this is very imperfect here. I made a mistake there. Well, I did, since it was my first time, I did something that I would not do again. Let me show you what it looks like from the inside. From the inside, you're looking at this. Here's the edge of the bottom edge of the sleeve with the split seam, the diamond shaped gusset, which is a square set on end, and then the side seam for the chemise. So I'm going to walk you through step by step. First thing that I learned was go ahead and finish all your seams off, because especially if you're using a serger, there's no way to just serge this seam. Like, you're going to have to use your sewing machine, and it's going to be relatively difficult to finish any seams off after the fact. So I would go ahead and just finish them off. Pink and shear them, zigzag them, whatever you do to finish off your seams, go ahead and do that now. Here is my sleeve. I finished off 3 of the sides. This last side will be the hem at the bottom, so of course it doesn't have to be finished off right now. And then my gusset has gone missing. And then my gusset, I went ahead and finished all 4 edges. And then the actual chemise, I finished this entire side seam, the armhole seam that connects into the side seam. The whole thing is just finished. So my first step that I want to do is I want to take the side, I'm going to take my sleeve, this is my top edge of my sleeve, and I'm going to take the side that faces the back on this sleeve. So when I put this sleeve in my right hand armhole, right here, this is going to be my side that faces the back. So I'm going to take my gusset, I'm going to match up the top side of the sleeve with the gusset, because as you can see, the gusset is shorter than the sleeve, and that's intentional. So I'm going to match that up, and I'm going to pin that and sew it with 1/2 inch seams. But this is where I made my mistake last time that I don't want you to make. So go all the way, don't sew all the way to the edge of the gusset when you sew this seam. Sew a 1/2 inch away from the edge of the gusset. So I'm going to sew all the way until I'm a 1/2 inch. Make sure you back stitch it. Make sure you back stitch all these seams good, because the pressure that's going to be put on them being an underarm seam. So as you can see, my gusset is free right there for that last 1/2 inch. Okay, so see how I didn't sew all the way to the end. Then what I'm going to do is take this and put it in the armhole. So in order to know where the middle is, because that's what's going to sit at the side seam, I'm going to fold my sleeve in half. A YouTuber that I watched mentioned even pressing it in half so that you can see that. I just fold it in half, put a little pin there, and then match that pin up to the side seam. That's how I typically do it, but I've also done that before where I've pressed in the measurement so that it's easy for me to see. So then match that up to my side seam. Same thing here. When I sew the sleeve side, this is the side of the sleeve that doesn't have the gusset attached. I'm going to sew to within 1/2 inch of the end of that sleeve. Okay, I'm not going to sew all the way to the end. I'm only going to sew to 1/2 inch away, because that's my seam size. Whatever your seam size is, you're going to sew that far away from it. You're not going to sew all the way to the very end. You want to sew to a 1/2 inch or 5/8 inch or 1/4 inch or whatever you made your seams on this, on your pattern draft or your pattern, then that's what you want to do here. Now, what I'm going to do on the side that has the gusset is I'm going to pin that down too. I'm going to open this up, this seam up, and pin it open. And I'm going to pin that down too, but same thing. I'm going to leave a 1/2 inch free at the very end. Okay, so I'm going to pin that all the way down on the back side of the armhole. I'm going to pin this seam flat open. Even though I didn't press it, I'm going to pin it open and I'll press it out later. All the way down to a 1/2 inch. So I'm going to leave a 1/2 inch free. Once again, you can see I left that pin there so I can see the 1/2 inch. Then I'm going to stitch this using my 1/2 inch seams. So remember, I want it to make that diamond shape. Okay, so this side is attached to the sleeve armhole. So then this side would be attached to the other side of the sleeve armhole. You're going to do that L. You're not going to do... So what I'm going to do in order to do that is I'm going to actually stitch the other side of the sleeve to the other side of the gusset in that L shape. This side is stitched to the back of the sleeve, so then this side on the other side of the L would be what I stitched to the front of the sleeve. Okay, so I'm going to take that. I'm going to match them up again once at the top edge of the sleeve. And when you stitch this, if you cannot stitch all the way to the very edge without catching the fabric, that's fine. Once again, the 1/2 inch away rule will work as long as you back stitch really well. So just make sure that you're back stitching on all of these points, beginning and end, so that nothing is coming undone in your underarm gusset later, because that's what will become a huge problem. See the top edge where the sleeve is, you don't want to stitch all the way to the end, stitch away a 1/2 inch. So just rule of thumb, just stitch away from a 1/2 inch everywhere. When you're putting in a gusset, don't actually go all the way to the edge in any cases, because if you do, then you're going to have trouble starting the next one. That's why I had that ugly little spot under the sleeve, because I went all the way to the edge, and I did it with the serger. The first seam I did with the serger, and I couldn't fix it very easily, so I just had to kind of finagle it. All right, so we have our two sleeve edges. Look, there we go. You can see now. We have our two sleeve edges, one on the front, on the back. Okay, so now we just need to do this a little bit under the arm. Okay, so you're just going to match that up. The gusset's just going to kind of fold right in there. And what you're going to do, there's going to be just a little point. You're going to pin those two in place, and then I'll show you where you're going to stitch there too. So you can see where the seam ends, the stitching ends right here. And because the gusset just kind of folds in a triangle shape, there's no chance of me catching it. So I'm literally just going to stitch from there all the way out a 1/2 inch. Okay. Okay, so you can see we have our first Y seam. See? So here's where I'm going to hem my sleeve right here. Here's my first Y seam. Now we just got to repeat that process for the side seam. So I still have one edge of my gusset that's loose. That's going to go on my side seam that doesn't have anything yet. Once again, stitching away a 1/2 inch from each corner of the gusset so that everything fits and stitches correctly. So I'm going to pin and stitch that, and then I'll pin and stitch the rest of the side seam in place just like I did the rest of the underarm seam. Alright, so it's all done except for the hems. You can see that I have it on. You can see how the neckline fits. I have the shoulder seams right about at the shoulders. think it's pulling back just a little bit, and that's really more just about me arranging the gathers so that it fits correctly. You can see it's a little loose right here. But that's also one of those things that I'll adjust for each dress, and once I get the corset on and all those different things, which the corset is the next thing I'm going to tackle. You can see the gussets under the arms. See how it makes that diagonal? All right, so here's what it looks like from a distance. As you can see, it dips a little bit on the sides, which was my concern when I cut the A-line. Usually when you have an A-line skirt, you cut them up slightly higher. So I'm going to go in and cut off, you know, about an inch or so on the sides and curve it down to the center. But other than that, I'm very happy with the way it's coming out. The armholes fit well. Actually, I might have gone just a slightly smaller on them, but they fit well. So it is completely done. You can see I cut, I think it actually ended up being almost 2 inches on the two side seams, and then curved it toward the center, and now I have a much straighter hem. I hemmed my sleeves, and they should be short enough to fit under ball gown sleeves now. Tighten up my ribbon a little bit so that it fits a little bit better here at the top. So this is the chemise, a Regency chemise made from a diagram from an original. Alright, so I'm going to end this video by giving you some feedback on how I would change this chemise if I were making it again. I've actually had a chance to wear it during some modeling for some photos and have realized some of the pros and cons of the fabric, the sizing, and the construction of the one that I show you how to make in this video. So I want to give you that information so that you can be an informed seamstress and choose the fabric and the sizing that's best for your body, your dress, your purposes, all of the above. The first thing that I mentioned early in the video was that the muslin washed up much stiffer than I had originally anticipated. I went ahead and made the chemise with it because it was the fabric I had on hand and had bought for the project, and I didn't think it would hurt. However, I would like to try a softer fabric. So right after I bought the muslin, I found a cotton gauze on fabric.com, which I have linked below. It is a very bleached white, but it's a very reasonable price. It's already washed up. It's much softer and much more flexible than the muslin washed up. One of the reasons that I typically avoid cotton gauze is it actually has a slight stretch to it. Even though it's a woven, it has these wrinkles that are built into it, so it actually stretches a little bit. I am not a big fan of sewing stretchy fabrics, so I typically avoid things that have stretch. However, I think that this stretch in this fabric will actually help with one of the issues that has arisen from my original cotton muslin chemise. So when I wear this chemise, obviously this part fits right at the top of my bust line, right? And because there's so many layers of this thicker fabric here, you've got the original chemise, you've got the binding, you've got the ribbon, and you've got the lace stitched on. It actually kind of creates a pull across my bust line right there, which then creates kind of a line like your bra can make underneath your clothes. If your bra is slightly too small, it creates a line like that. So I'm thinking because this one is stretchy, it might help with that issue. In addition, when I make the chemise out of this cotton gauze, instead of putting so many layers at the neckline like I did on this one, I'm thinking about simply serging off the neckline and then laying on a lace like this along that and running the ribbon directly through the lace. So that'll take it from 4 layers to about 2 layers. And even though it's not 100% historically accurate, I think that it will work better for my purposes underneath the dresses when I'm wearing it. In addition, one of the things I realized about the sizing on this chemise is that I said to cut this 20 inches wide. I was thinking that would be plenty wide to pull it in across here. It's wide enough to wear it off your shoulders. If you have a dress that has super narrow seams at the shoulders and you're needing to hide it. But what I forgot about was that 20 inches would also translate to here in your bust area, and that is actually slightly too small for my bust. So what's happening is when I put this chemise on underneath my corset, it's pulling in my bust and making the corset seem like it's too big. So I am having issues when I'm trying to wear this and model it with that, in addition to the line that this is creating across the top of my bust. So when you are drawing out your pattern, when you're drafting your pattern, when you're looking at measurements, make sure that whatever measurement you make for the width of the front and the back is wide enough to accommodate your bust comfortably. And you have to remember that with the Regency stays, a lot of times there's a bust or some boning that goes right in between here, and that will even take up even more fabric under there because it's pushing in. So give a little bit of extra ease, make it bigger than your bust measurement, and give in, I would say, probably at least 4 inches of ease, just to make sure that you're not having the same issues that this one is creating for me. Now, I have other models that are going to be modeling with me in the photography shoot that I'm going to be doing, and some of them are smaller busted, and so they will be able to wear this. So it's not a loss for me. It's just something that I learned. So make sure that when you cut that measurement, you cut it wide enough to accommodate your bust measurement plus ease and seams. I would recommend at least 4 inches of ease. The other sizing thing that I would change is the neckline depth. I think the front neckline is good. I was originally worried about it being too deep. I actually like it, and because of the way that I can pull the shoulders up with these, the ribbon casing, I think it works great. The back neckline is a little bit tricky when I wear a lower neckline on like a ball gown. So in order to accommodate a lower neckline on a ball gown, I literally have to wear it off my shoulders like this. And even then, I usually have to kind of push in a little bit of lace or whatever that's trying to peek out the back. So when I make the next one, I will make the back neckline slightly deeper. I would say about 1 inch deeper than I originally drafted it for this pattern. So those are the ways that I would definitely change it. Make sure you accommodate your bust line, go with a little bit softer fabric, perhaps try to go with less layers here along the top edge. If it was a higher neckline, like a Victorian era chemise, I would just raise the neckline so it wouldn't hit me at that area on the bust. The problem is with Regency dresses, the necks, especially on the ball gowns, are cut so low that you really have to cut your chemise that low in order for it to do its job and yet not show out the top of the neckline. So that's why I'm saying don't move the neckline. Just try to put less layers here along this so that it doesn't do that pulling in and leave a mark under the dress. Other than that, I am very pleased with how this came out, especially for a first try, especially drafting from a historical diagram. And if you have any questions, like always, please feel free to leave them in the comments or find me on Facebook or Instagram and message me. I have linked a downloadable pattern and instructions for this chemise below. So please feel free to click on that and download it so you have it all in writing. And I've drawn out the diagram on graph paper so that you can use that to transfer over and make your own drafted pattern. Thank you so much for watching and for joining me on this journey.